My mom realized very quickly that if she asked her 3 children how their day at school was, she'd get 3 goods in response. So she got more creative, and often I'd hop off the bus at the end of the day and find her there waiting, with the first question she asked being, "Rachel, what did you learn today?" Now that was an incredibly powerful question to grow up around. My mom was a music teacher and I was a keener, and you'd often find my nose in a book. At home, learning was celebrated, but it was a different story at school. There, it was effortless success, not learning, that was celebrated. And the smartest kid in the class was the one that studied the least, but got the highest grade. And I was fascinated by this. Year after year, I couldn't figure out why my peers had a different level of engagement than I did, even in university where we were paying to be there. Now, the exception to this was fake school, which was what my roommates affectionately called a semester I spent with the city of Hamilton, working in a classroom every single day to understand the housing crisis. It was called fake school because often I would go downtown on field trips, and sometimes my projects looked like carving a pumpkin. Now, this was a highlight of my time in school, but there was still disengagement. And I think this picture is something that we see very commonly in classrooms, someone on their phone, like my classmate here. It is so common that it is so easy to look at this and look away. But this kind of picture, and this kind of view that I would see day in and day out in my education was a question that came back to me, wondering why. Why are we okay with school being boring like this? Why is this the standard? Now, I was inspired by a program at the University of Berkeley, and in my final semester at university, I had conversations with people at my school trying to implement this program. But I was reminded through these conversations that I was just a student, and it felt like I was fighting against bureaucracy and a tradition of what education should look like. Now, during this journey, I came across a list of some of the most innovative universities in the world. And I looked at that list and I wondered, do these people feel the same way that I do? But of course, it was just a list. So I put together a proposal, and 10 months later, I found myself on a plane to Helsinki. Now I was going to visit Aalto University and their PDP program, which is a product development project that students would receive 10,000 euros, and they would have 8 months to put together a product for their sponsor company. The week that followed was a blur. It was intense. And it was absolutely nothing like I expected. Before I arrived, I had cold contacted everyone that I could get my hands on to talk with. And they welcomed me with open arms. In that week, I experienced what it's like to start a new semester at a Finnish university. I experienced the welcome ceremony, and I experienced the first class of the semester for this program. I felt like what it was like to go to the office hours with a prof, and I had a lot of conversations. In fact, I even ended off the week going to a cabin in the woods with a group of the student council. I learned a lot. And 3 of those learnings that I'd like to share with you is, number 1, the space, the physical space that we design for our learning is so important. The space creates the experience, and often we look past the space and we look at the contents, but that's something. Number two, there is such an important balance that we need to find between structure and freedom. And when we give our students agency, we need to have an open door policy, so when they have questions, which they will have questions, we can welcome them back and say, hey, I've got you. And number three, I learned what the impact of having more saunas in Finland than people means. Imagine if you were a student in this program, what the impact of having a sauna in the same building as your classroom is, and what it would mean if the norm is to go at the end of the week for a sauna with your professor. Now this was just the first of 10 universities that I visited. And over the span of the next 2 months, I had a lot more conversations and I asked a lot more questions. I talked to over 50 individuals in total, and I went on countless school tours and classroom visits. And during this whole experience, I thought a lot about education and what we can do to build the most immersive, the most engaging classroom experiences possible. Now, I tried to find some way of synthesizing all of this, which was an incredibly hard task, but I came up with a formula. Now, this formula is really good. It's great. I mean, imagine if we gave this to every new teacher and we said, look at this, maximize this, or we put it on the wall of every classroom and said, this is the gold standard. This is what we want for our students. But again, I've thought about education a lot, and I've realized that this is not enough. Because the thing is, the knowledge problem is different now. And what I mean by that is that we need to look at the history of how we use knowledge, because knowledge was power. Knowledge was in books, and those books were in libraries, and those libraries were in palaces that the rich had keys to. But now, knowledge is everywhere. A quick Google search will confirm that. And this is powerful, but it has dramatically changed the way that we interact with information. When we look around now, we live in a world of collective intelligence. We aren't just writing in books, we are writing together in real time with AI and with communities on a mass scale. That's exciting. But there is a cost of having such an incredible access to information. And that is a cost that we can't quite see yet, because in the future, what I believe is that we need to be better architects of knowledge itself. We need to be like the builders that build our structures, but with knowledge, because if we don't, then we are going to become overwhelmed by the information that we're faced. Now, I've thought a lot about education, but a lot of that thinking I did in the context of an institution, in a classroom. And it's so much more than that, because we go to school, a lot of us, for the first 20, 21 years of our lives. And then we leave school and we say, school did not prepare me for this. And there are gaps. But the thing is that school cannot prepare us for the rest of our lives. And it is up to us as individuals to fill in those gaps. So I want to tell you 3 ways that we can start to build up a better process for our knowledge and become those architects that we need to be. And the first thing is to think in systems. I don't know about you, but I often think in projects. At work or at school, I'm often given a task to complete, and I complete that task. But then I have to move on to the next task. And I have never had a way of picking up and putting down in any situation. Well, this behind me is a system, and it has an input, and it has an output, and it has a process. And it is something that I can pick up and I can put down on any situation. But I know that this is abstract. So I want all of you to close your eyes for a second. Now I want to ask you, what is your system for learning? What goes into your system? What sources do you look at for knowledge? Is it Instagram or TikTok? Do you have a book club? What topics do you prioritize? Do you love hockey? Do you love learning about that? Or do you love relationships? I want to ask you, what happens when you're wrong? How quickly does it take you to update your knowledge? With your eyes closed, I want you to wonder how you structure and you transform your knowledge. Do you have a process for that? And what are the results of your learning? Do you have tangible outcomes, or is your brain just waiting for the moment that knowledge that you've been consuming can come out? I want you to ask yourself what drives your learning. For me, sometimes it's FOMO. Sometimes it's one of my friends picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, Rachel, I think that you should look at this. I really want to have a conversation about this." And with your eyes closed, I want you to ask yourself a final question of how do you improve learning? And who decides what you learn? I want you to open your eyes now. That was a knowledge audit. Before a few months ago, I had never done that. I had never asked myself, how am I learning? And you may find, as I did, that you do not have a system for your knowledge. And that is why the next step is to build one. Now, the impact of doing an audit of your knowledge is that you'll start to see the gaps. And if you look up on Google right now, how do I build a personal knowledge management system? You will find quite a bit of information on different tools you can use and the exact structure that you could use. But I think that there is something a little bit more simple that we can be asking ourselves. What are those gaps? What are those things that I really care about? Because if you build a system to help you in that, then you are going to be able to make better decisions and be prepared to not be overwhelmed. And with a system comes processes. And this process can be as simple as capturing, then organizing, then reflecting, then applying, and sharing. Just that simple. For me, that looks like sending messages to myself throughout the week. And I know, yes, I do talk to myself, but I actually find it really helpful. I send these messages of key moments and key learnings throughout my week. And then at the end of the week on a Sunday, I write myself an email. And this email will share things that I'm talking about and thinking about, what I'm learning, what I want to do. And the impact of sending this weekly email to myself is that I've started to see what is coming in and what is going out of my brain. Now, the last hack that I want to share is very full circle for me because it is avoiding passivity. And I think that this is very fitting for a project that started from me looking around at the disengagement in classrooms. But I've seen that the world encourages us to be passive consumers of information. And all we really need to do is internalize this. We often feel this pressure to passively consume more and more. And all we really need to be doing is bringing more awareness to what we are already learning. And you can do this with an oath of active or effortful consumption, which could be as simple as putting down the phone that you were scrolling Instagram with and picking up an e-reader so that you can have that moment, that space to pause and think about what you're learning. The system itself is flexible to what you need. But I have learned so much about education over this trip around the world and so many hours spent time thinking. What I've really seen is that we need to, as individuals, start to build these systems, because otherwise we're going to be overwhelmed by that information. So I'm going to leave you with one final challenge. I want everyone to take out their phones right now. And I want you to open up a note on your phone, and I want you to title the note, "What I'm Learning." And you're going to add a bullet point with one thing that you're taking away from this talk. But before you do, I want you to turn to the person next to you and tell them what you were about to write down, and I'll give you 20 seconds for that. Now, you might have found that you turned to the person next to you and you had a little bit of fear in your eyes because you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know. I've just been an audience member. I'm just taking this in. But this is this challenge, right? Be more active, be questioning, be critical, and share that with others. Because if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this talk, it's that the 2030s will reward those who master knowledge systems and not just knowledge itself. Thank you.